Hello kids, so I'm back with AP Microeconomics and today I'll be doing supply. So AP Microeconomics, AP Micro, and I'll start with supply. Okay, so what do you mean by supply? Supply is basically the amount of goods producers they are willing and able to offer, right? They are willing and also able to offer for sale at various prices in a given time period. So just like it's demand, willing and able to buy amount of goods and services, right? Similarly, you have supply where the producers are the amount of goods or services the producers are willing and able to offer for sale at various prices in a given time period, right? Very simple. So it's actually simple, if you have understood demand, it's easy to understand supply as well. All right. So, given this, again, the supply curve, will be on these two axes, right? So, again, we'll have price on the y axis. And instead of quantity demanded, I'll have quantity supplied. So, that's the difference, right? And yes, the supply curve is upward sloping, right? That's how the supply curve is. So at higher prices, the producers are willing and able to offer higher quantity of goods, right? So if this is P1, P2, P3, then Q1, Q2, Q3, right? And why so? It's because, price changes, they send different signals to buyers and sellers. Higher prices make sellers happy. Why? Because higher prices means higher profits. So higher prices for the producers, it means higher profits for them, right? So that's my sign of profits. So it means basically higher profits for them. So that's why they would be actually willing to supply more and more at higher prices. That's why your supply curve is upward sloping. All right. So remember that. And that's how you have to draw the supply curve. So unlike your demand curve, I'll just go back a little for the demand curve. Your demand curve was downward sloping, right? With prices again out here and quantity demanded out here. It was downward sloping. The supply curve is upward sloping. All right. Now let's quickly come to the factors affecting supply. All right. What are the factors affecting supply? So factors or determinants affecting supply. So factors of supply. First and the foremost factor affecting supply is same as demand one is the price, but here they are positively related. So as price increases, the quantity supplied also increases. So they are positively related. All right. The second factor that's there is your cost of production. Change in cost of production. Change in cost of production. Right? I'll write COP for cost of production. So as the cost of production increases, all right, what happens? The quantity, the supply basically decreases. Okay. Why? Because as the cost of production increases, the cost for the producers increases, thereby lowering its profits, and that is why the producers they curtail the supply. So the supply basically decreases. All right. Okay. Then you have the third factor affecting supply is change in technology. Change in technology. Right? So with this, what happens that as if there is an advancement in technology, if there is an increase in technology, right? Increase in technology basically meaning that there is an advancement in technology, then the supply increases, right? And why so? Because as there is increase in technology, the cost of production goes down, right? Because advancement in technology over a period of time lowers the cost of production for the producer. So that is why cost of production going down, the profits going up for the producer for the same quantity of goods, and that is why the supply will increase. They'll increase the supply in the market. All right. The fourth point is the change in producers' price expectation. All right. So what do I mean by this? So if this delta represents the change in producer's price expectation, it basically means that if a producer is expecting a higher price in the future, then currently the supply will go down. Currently the supply will go down, right? Currently the producer will supply less, right? If expecting a higher price in the future. Why? Because in the future, since a higher price is expected, he will be earning more profits in the future by supplying the product. So he will reduce the supply currently. And vice versa. If a lower price is expected in future, then obviously the sales will increase currently. The supply in the market for that product will increase currently. All right. Okay. Then the fifth factor is change in the price of alternative good. Change in the price of alternative good, right? The goods. Okay. So in this, what we actually look at now, this is like similar to, in the demand we had one of the factors of prices of unrelated goods, right? That is, we had those two categories, substitute and complementary goods, where we were looking at the price, the change in the price of one good having the effect on the quantity demanded of the other good, right? Similarly, here also we will look at that. So change in the price of one good, right, on the supply of the other good. That's what we'll look at. Okay, so price of one good and the supply of the other good. Instead of demand, we have the supply. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say the price of wheat in the market decreases due to some reason, right? The price of wheat in the market decreases due to some reasons. Now farmers, they produce less of wheat, right? Farmers produce less of wheat. Farmers produce less wheat. Produce. Okay, farmers produce less wheat, right? Because the profits would be lower because the prices are lower. Farmers produce less wheat, and what do? They actually, so they produce less wheat. That basically means that the quantity, that the supply of wheat in the market, right? I'll actually don't write Q out here. I'll write it as supply of wheat in the market decreases, right? But then what farmers do, they find that the prices of soybean in the market is pretty high, so they start cultivating, or they switch to soybean production. And so what happens, that the supply of soybean in the market increases. All right. But yes, having said that, that's only possible when producers can easily switch between the production of these different types of products, right? They can easily switch their tools, equipment, machinery, and labor and everything between these two products. Only then this is possible, right? That's one of the condition. Yes, that's there, right? But yes, that's how they are related. So if the price of wheat in the market increases, if the price of, let's say, wheat in the market increases, what impact will it have on the supply of soybean in the market? Okay, that's what we are looking at. So price of wheat going down, the supply of wheat decreases in the market, but the farmers switch to more profitable product and they start producing more of soybean, let's say, in the market, if they find that profitable. And so the supply of soybean in the market increases. It's just that, you have to just understand that if you are given a question like this can also be the connection that you have to look for. That's what. Right? Okay. All right. Then we move to, the next factor affecting the supply, and that would be, okay, that's sixth. The next factor affecting the supply would be taxes. Taxes and subsidies I would take up together. All right. Taxes basically lead to increase in the cost of production, and subsidies basically lead to decrease in the cost of production. So if the government imposes a tax on a product, so obviously its product price increases, cost of production for the sellers or for the producers increase, and so the supply decreases, right? And subsidies, what are subsidies? So subsidies are basically the payment from the government to produce a product, right? So it basically reduces the cost of production for the producer. So subsidies, if the government provides subsidies, then obviously the cost of production goes down and the supply in the market increases. Now these two are actually, the impact of any government action that's taken, right? Because taxes and subsidies both are imposed by the government. So it's basically the government action that leads to this kind of a thing. All right. Okay. All right. Now, the next factor, that's seventh, right? The seventh factor affecting supply would be your change in the number of sellers. Change in the number of sellers. All right. So as the number of sellers increase, right, obviously the supply in the market increases, right? Okay. Now, these are not the only factors affecting supply, right? But it's just that we have given you some important ones, right? Which are like very evident, which you can really relate, and which are like most important ones, you can say. But yes, there could be n number of other factors that could affect the supply. All right. Okay, again, I just want to pinpoint two things out here. One, as same as demand, so two terms that you really need to understand the difference between them is change in quantity supplied and change in supply, right? Same like demand, change in quantity supplied would be only used, quantity supplied would be only used when we are referring to change in the quantity supplied due to change in the price, right? Only when there is change in the price, we say that there is change in the quantity supplied. For all the other factors, whatever we have discussed, right? For all the other factors, we will refer to as change in supply. So if there is a change in supply due to, let's say, decrease in cost of production, I would use the term supply, change in supply, and not the term change in quantity supplied. You really, really have to understand this and remember this. So quantity supplied is used only when the change has happened due to change in prices of the product. All right. Okay. All right. Another one thing. So it's just like in demand, it's the movement along the supply curve. Okay. So I have this. The supply curve is upward sloping, right? We did that. That's the price, that's zero, that's this, that's quantity supply, right? Now, the change in price gives you the movement along the supply curve. So if the price changes, if there's an increase in the price, the quantity supplied increases, right? If there is a decrease in the price, the quantity supplied decreases, right? So it gives you a movement along the supply curve. Okay, that's one thing. Then you have the shifts in the supply curve. Now, shifts in the supply curve, just like the demand, are given by all the other factors except price, because we are keeping price to be constant. So we are saying that now the supply is not affected by the price, but is affected by any other factor but price. So that is why at this same level of price, we are saying that if the cost of production increases, if the cost of production, let's say I take up this cost of production as a factor, I say cost of production increases, then what happens to supply? Then the supply will decrease, right? We know that supply decreases. So with a decrease, the supply would move left, parallel shift in supply curve at the same price level. All right. So any decrease in supply will be demonstrated on a graph by a leftward shift in the supply curve. All right. Any factor, any other factor except price that is leading to a decrease in supply. So if there's an increase in taxes, let's say if there is a some bad technology that has a firm has taken up, and that has increased the cost of production for the firm, so again there would be a decrease in supply. So any factor except price that is leading to a decrease in supply will shift the supply curve towards left at the same price level. However, if I say, let's say that the government has given subsidies, that has actually decreases the cost of production for the producers, and so the producers increase the supply, so the price is constant, right? Just remember that. So any shifts in the supply curve is happening when the price is constant. Then if the supply increases because of any other factors but price, then it would shift towards right. So it will be a parallel shift, though my line is not parallel to the original one, but it would be a parallel shift at the same price level. So the supply has increased. There's an increase in the supply from, let's say, if I mark this as Q0, this one as Q0. So it goes to Q2. If there's an increase, it goes to Q1 if there is a decrease at the same price level. So I'm repeating that again. If there is an increase in supply due to any other factors but price, the supply curve will shift towards right. If there is a decrease in supply due to any other factors but price, the supply curve will shift towards left at the same price level. All right. Okay. Then we come to, just like we had law of demand, we will also be having law of supply. Okay. So what does law of supply say? Law of supply says that, again, the same terminology, ceteris paribus. That's really, really, really important for you to understand. If this word is not given and you are asked, okay, which of the following is the law of supply, but for some of the options this word is not given and the rest of the statement is the same, still you will not, you know, tick that option as the correct option. This word has to be there because it's a very strong assumption that we are taking if all the other factors are constant. So all the other things remaining constant, that's what this term means, right? So all the other factors remaining constant, as the price of the product increases, then the quantity supplied also increases. And as the price of the product decreases, then the quantity supplied also decreases, right? So it's both ways, right? That's what the law of supply says. And again, why this happens, we have already discussed. This happens because as the price of the product increases, then it becomes more and more profitable for the producer to sell the product at a higher price, right? Because he will be earning more and more profit. So, yes, he is willing to sell more and more products at the higher price. All right. Okay. Then we come to, just like we had consumer surplus in, under demand or under consumer behavior or consumer theory, we also have producer surplus. All right. So I'll draw the graph again, right? Very simple one. Let's say that's my supply curve starting from origin. And I have, let's say my price is this much, right? And that's my quantity supplied. Okay. Now producer surplus is basically the difference between cost of producing the product. The supply curve basically gives you the cost of producing the product, right? So it tells you that if 1 unit of product is produced, what's the cost? If an additional unit is produced, then what's the cost? The total cost of the two. Or if you just look from here to here, it tells you the additional cost, and so on and so forth. So supply curve gives you actually the cost of producing the product. So producer surplus is nothing, producer surplus is nothing but the difference between cost of producing the product minus or subtracting, right, the market selling price, market selling price of the product. All right. Now, in this case, the market selling price is this P, right? So, in our example, the producer surplus is basically this entire area because that's the cost of production of producing the product, and but the market supply is this much, right? So, this entire area is your producer surplus for, let's say, a product, the quantity of the product being here. All right. Or you can also say, just like we did in demand, or it can also be said that it's the difference between the willing price of the producer to sell minus, so hang on. So it would be actually the other way around. So, this would give you actually a negative number. It would be the other way around. So it would be like the market selling price of the product minus the cost of producing the product, right? So basically the difference between the two. The difference between this and this, the market selling price, is your producer surplus. Or in other words, it's the willingness of the producer to actually sell a product at what price the producer wants to sell, because supply curve gives you the willingness price of the producer to sell a product minus the actual price the producer gets, right? So basically the difference between the two. So in order to take that, it has to be the other way around, right? I mean, to give you a positive number, right? Difference between two, right? So this entire thing should come actually here. So market selling price of the producer minus the cost of producing the product, right? And here also it would be not this, right? So it would be the actual selling price minus the willingness price of the producer. All right, that's what it is. That's the producer surplus. So similar to consumer surplus, we have this producer surplus. Now it will be more clear when we'll come to the equilibrium, and I'll show you on the same graph where is the consumer surplus and where is the producer surplus. All right. Okay, that's all for today. And next, I'll start with most probably the elasticity. All right. Okay. See you until then. Bye bye.